The sky was unnaturally dark that evening. Satellites across the globe sent out alerts, first detecting unusual movements in space. Governments scrambled, their radar systems detecting what appeared to be ships, thousands of them, hurtling toward Earth at impossible speeds. But these were no ordinary craft. The metallic behemoths had no visible markings, their surfaces corroded and ancient-looking, like ships from a forgotten era. They looked more like derelict vessels than advanced warships, their edges jagged, their hulls covered in patches of rust and decay. The world held its breath. The first broadcasts from the invaders were simple, direct, and chilling. An alien voice, cold and mechanical, echoed through every communication channel. "We are the Eldari. This planet is now under our domain. You have 30 Earth hours to surrender, or we will wipe your species from existence." The message hit humanity like a thunderclap. At first, there was disbelief, then panic. A wave of terror swept over the Earth, as people everywhere realized that this was no joke, no hoax. Governments, unprepared for an invasion of this magnitude, quickly called emergency meetings. Global leaders, military commanders, and top scientists were summoned, each struggling to grasp the situation. The alien ships were already visible in the sky, massive and ominous. Their arrival seemed to suck the light from the day. Even the most advanced telescopes and sensors couldn't determine where they had come from. The Eldari made no attempt to hide their presence. They hovered above major cities, their enormous forms casting long, shadowy silhouettes. Then came the first explosion. An Eldari ship fired a single blast from a strange energy weapon, and the target city, New York, was engulfed in flames. That single act of destruction was enough to send a clear message. They were not here to negotiate. People ran through the streets, chaos sweeping across the globe. National borders dissolved as humanity's greatest threat became clear. No one was safe. The Eldari didn't need to speak further. Their actions said it all. Yet, even as the world seemed to crumble, one thing became clear. Humanity wasn't ready to simply roll over. In bunkers across the globe, military leaders and strategists began to devise plans. The aliens were confident in their superiority. They had technology far beyond anything humanity had ever known, but they didn't understand the human spirit. Despite being vastly outgunned, Earth's resistance was already forming, quietly but surely. A secret meeting in Geneva brought together a diverse group of humanity's brightest minds: engineers, military tacticians, and scientists. Among them was Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes, a decorated officer with a history of unconventional tactics, and Dr. Eleanor Green, a leading scientist in aerospace engineering. They shared a single conviction: humanity would not go down without a fight. "We need to figure out how to fight back," Hayes said, his voice steady but tense. "We may be behind them in technology, but they've made a critical mistake by underestimating us." Dr. Green nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. "They see us as weak, as primitive, but we have something they don't: our creativity, our adaptability. We've survived worse than this." The group worked around the clock, pooling their knowledge, brainstorming ideas, and formulating strategies. They knew that every second counted. The Eldari might think they could crush humanity with their advanced weapons, but what they didn't know was how far humans could go when their backs were against the wall. They were about to learn a hard lesson. As the sun set on that fateful day, the world knew one thing for certain: humanity would fight. They would fight with everything they had. The world's response to the Eldari invasion was swift but disorganized. While the world's militaries scrambled to form some sort of united defense, it became clear that no one was prepared for an enemy with technology light years ahead of humanity's own. The first direct attack came at the heart of Europe, where a massive Eldari warship fired a concentrated beam down onto Paris. The blast disintegrated entire districts in seconds, and the shockwaves rippled out across the continent. Earth's defenses, fighter jets, missile batteries, and even nuclear warheads, were ineffective. The aliens didn't even flinch. It was a gruesome reminder of how powerless humanity appeared in the face of such overwhelming force. In the midst of this chaos, pockets of resistance began to form. The global networks, already strained under the pressure, struggled to maintain communication, but people found ways to resist. Cities and towns across the world, from Beijing to Sao Paulo, organized their own makeshift militias, focusing not on conventional warfare, but on guerrilla tactics, sabotage, and surprise strikes. Ordinary citizens took up arms, setting traps, fighting in small, nimble groups, and using their knowledge of the terrain to their advantage. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes watched as this organic resistance began to grow. Even though his own forces were scattered and disorganized, he saw a flicker of hope in the way humanity refused to give up. The military might have been broken, but the spirit of the people was alive. They had faced worse before and emerged stronger for it. Now, they were determined to do the same again. Hayes gathered a handful of his most trusted officers. They knew they couldn't match the Eldari's advanced technology head-to-head, but they had an edge. The one thing the Eldari seemed to lack: humanity's adaptability. He and his team began coordinating with resistance leaders, sharing tactical knowledge, and focusing on the weaknesses they could exploit. Hit them where they least expected. Hayes instructed his officers. We don't need to win every battle, but we need to keep them off balance. Strike and disappear. Make them question if they've underestimated us. Dr. Eleanor Green, now working with a group of top engineers and scientists, started studying the wreckage of the Eldari ships that had crashed or been taken down in battle. Though the technology was foreign, they began to decipher fragments of alien data. It was clear that the Eldari used a sophisticated form of energy-based weaponry and propulsion, but there were gaps in their systems, weak points that humanity could exploit. In an underground lab, Dr. Green worked late into the night, poring over the data with a small team of engineers. They began developing rudimentary countermeasures, focusing on shielding and jamming technologies. The scientists couldn't make any miracles overnight, but they were making progress. Every day, new ideas, new theories emerged. Each discovery, no matter how small, gave them a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, the Eldari remained unrelenting. Their forces swept through major cities, obliterating military strongholds and occupying key infrastructure. The aliens seemed almost bored with the resistance, their commanders issuing orders with a sense of arrogance that betrayed their belief in their own invincibility. But the human resistance was far from done. As the Eldari made their way across the globe, the resistance groups struck back in ways the invaders couldn't predict. The people of Earth, ordinary civilians, soldiers, engineers, had begun to adapt faster than the Eldari anticipated. Instead of fighting with conventional methods, they fought with every ounce of their creativity, using everything from old military surplus to hacked alien technology. One of the first major victories came in the Middle East, where a coalition of rebel forces managed to down a scout ship using a combination of homegrown EMP devices and primitive explosives. It wasn't a decisive blow, but it was enough to send a message to the Eldari. Humanity wasn't going to roll over. They were fighting back, and they were learning. Word of the victory spread quickly, becoming a beacon of hope for the rest of the world. Resistance leaders rallied around the idea that humanity could win this fight, not by matching the Eldari's strength, but by using the very ingenuity that had helped them survive through countless wars, disasters, and crises. The Eldari were still confident in their victory, but for the first time, cracks began to appear in their unshakable arrogance. They underestimated the resilience of the human spirit, and that would be their greatest mistake. The attacks were relentless, but so was humanity's resolve. Across the globe, people who had once been ordinary civilians now found themselves thrust into a war they hadn't asked for. Teachers, doctors, farmers, each with no formal military training, became soldiers, engineers, and strategists. With each victory, however small, the people of Earth grew bolder. There was a sense of unity, a realization that the enemy had underestimated them. Even the most mundane of tools were transformed into weapons of resistance. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes had become a symbol of this new resistance. His reputation spread like wildfire, a beacon of hope amidst the chaos. He coordinated efforts with resistance cells worldwide, advising them on unconventional tactics and directing them to where the Eldari were weakest. Hayes knew that they couldn't match the alien forces in terms of sheer firepower, but they could outsmart them. One of his most daring strategies involved luring an Eldari patrol into a trap in the mountains of Norway. Using old military tactics of misdirection, they tricked the aliens into believing they were facing a much larger force. The result was devastating for the Eldari. A half-dozen scout ships were destroyed before they even knew what hit them. It wasn't a victory that would win the war, but it was one the humans desperately needed. At the same time, Dr. Eleanor Green and her team were working tirelessly, pulling from every resource available to decipher alien technology. The crashes of Eldari ships had become invaluable sources of knowledge. While the technology was advanced, it wasn't infallible. They had begun to piece together ways to disrupt the alien shields and even disable some of their energy-based weapons. It was a breakthrough that could potentially tip the balance of the war. The group had learned that the Eldari relied heavily on centralized energy sources within their ships. If they could target those, they might be able to neutralize their firepower. One day, after weeks of work, they made a critical discovery: an ancient human system of energy manipulation, buried deep within the data extracted from the alien technology, aligned almost perfectly with the Eldari's power grid. Dr. Green's team set to work, building a prototype device that could potentially interfere with the aliens' power sources. It was a long shot, but it was humanity's best hope. As the days turned into weeks, the resistance began to feel a growing sense of momentum. The aliens, for all their might, hadn't accounted for humanity's adaptability. With every strike, every sabotage, and every counterattack, the Eldari grew more frustrated. They began to send in larger and more aggressive forces, trying to stamp out humanity's resistance once and for all. But the humans were always one step ahead. The technological breakthroughs didn't stop with the power disruptors. Resistance engineers found a way to modify captured Eldari spacecraft, using human ingenuity to retrofit them with makeshift weapons and shields. The first time a modified Eldari ship took off from Earth's atmosphere, it was a moment of triumph that resonated across the globe. The humans weren't just fighting with their own limited resources, they were learning, adapting, and overcoming. The transformation was profound. From mere survivors, they were becoming a formidable force in the galaxy. In the midst of all this, humanity's military forces began to take a more coordinated approach. The world's armies, for the first time, joined forces to form a unified front. Countries that had once been bitter rivals now shared intelligence, weapons, and soldiers. The idea of a united human race fighting for its survival was becoming a reality. The first true human fleet, constructed from a mix of military ships and modified civilian vessels, prepared for its first offensive strike against the Eldari. The people of Earth had already fought countless wars, endured famines, and survived global crises. Now they were being tested like never before, but what they had lacked in resources, they made up for with determination and resilience. No longer were they simply fighting for survival. They were fighting for their place in the universe. As the resistance spread across the world, the Eldari started to realize something they hadn't considered before. Humanity wasn't just resilient. They were capable of more than survival. They were capable of rising above their limitations, of building something far greater than the sum of their parts. And that was a mistake the Eldari were about to learn the hard way. As humanity's resistance efforts grew more coordinated, the tide of war slowly began to shift. The alien invaders, though advanced in technology, had underestimated the human spirit, and the relentless ingenuity of Earth's people had begun to turn the odds in their favor. But it wasn't just human determination that started to make a difference. It was the discovery of something far older and more powerful than anything the Eldari could have predicted. Dr. Eleanor Green's team, in their relentless pursuit to understand the wreckage of Eldari ships, uncovered a startling truth. Deep within the remains of a long-abandoned underground research facility in Africa, buried beneath layers of history and overgrown vegetation, they found an ancient relic, a strange, crystalline structure. It was unlike anything the scientists had ever seen before, smooth, iridescent, and humming with a faint energy. It wasn't until further analysis revealed the structure's hidden function that the true magnitude of their discovery became clear. This was no ordinary artifact. It was part of an advanced network that predated both the Eldari and humanity's known history. The artifact appeared to be connected to a lost human civilization, one that had existed long before recorded time. Dr. Green and her team soon realized that this network of hidden technology wasn't just for storage. It was a repository of knowledge and power. The energy contained within the artifact was not only capable of enhancing the technology they had already captured from the Eldari, but also capable of altering the balance of power in their favor. The revelation came in stages. At first, it was small, seemingly insignificant technological improvements. The energy field they discovered could be harnessed to improve the jamming devices they had previously created, allowing humanity to disable alien weapons more effectively. The modified Eldari ships became faster and more resilient, while their weaponry became more deadly, thanks to the new energy source they now controlled. But that was only the beginning. The artifact was only one part of a vast, hidden network that spread across Earth. More pieces were discovered in ancient ruins from every corner of the globe. The remnants of this lost civilization seemed to be deliberately scattered across the planet, carefully hidden, perhaps even protected from those who might try to misuse them. The technology it offered was beyond anything humanity had ever seen, and it was clear that the alien invasion wasn't the first time Earth had been under threat from a far more powerful force. The discovery of this legacy sparked a sense of unity and purpose among the resistance. As humans began to tap into the knowledge and tools left behind by their ancient ancestors, a new sense of pride emerged. The realization that their ancestors had once been part of a civilization far superior to the Eldari filled the humans with an unshakable confidence. They weren't just fighting for survival, they were reclaiming their rightful place in the galaxy. As Earth's military forces and civilian resistance groups mobilized with newfound strength, something else began to happen. The Eldari, once so confident in their superiority, started to notice the subtle changes in the war. Their advanced technologies, once unmatched, were now being turned against them. Alien ships that had once been impervious to human weapons now seemed vulnerable. Humanity's new energy-based weapons tore through Eldari shields with ease. Even their once impenetrable force fields began to flicker and fail under the concentrated assault of human technology. In the heart of Earth's most secure research facility, Dr. Green and her team were working day and night to perfect the ultimate weapon, a device capable of tapping into the full potential of the energy network they had uncovered. If it worked, it would change the course of the war entirely. They had learned enough from the Eldari ships to understand the fundamental weaknesses in their design. What had once seemed like an insurmountable enemy was now beginning to show cracks, and humanity was ready to exploit them. The time for retreat and hiding was over. Humanity had found its true strength, not in the weapons they had inherited from others, but in the power of their own forgotten history. With this new force, the resistance prepared to strike the Eldari with a blow that would send shockwaves through the invaders' ranks. The war was far from over, but humanity had just unlocked the key to their victory. The breakthrough came faster than anyone had expected. With the newfound energy source and the ancient technology uncovered from Earth's forgotten civilization, humanity's military forces began to gain an upper hand. What had once been an overwhelmingly one-sided war was now a contest between two formidable powers. The Eldari, for the first time since the invasion began, felt the pressure of a fight they hadn't anticipated. It all started with the first strike. The new energy-based weapons developed from the alien technology, powered by the ancient energy source, were tested on a fleet of Eldari ships that had ventured too close to Earth's atmosphere. What followed was nothing short of astonishing. The human-modified weapons tore through the Eldari shields with devastating force, leaving their once dominant ships vulnerable. The invaders, used to dominating every battlefield they entered, were now forced to retreat. Across Earth, the Resistance took notice. The Eldari were not invincible. For every victory they had claimed, there was now a counterattack waiting. From Asia to the Americas, pockets of resistance rose to join the fight. Earth's soldiers, working together with engineers and scientists, adapted faster than the Eldari ever could have imagined. What had once been a struggle for survival had now become a calculated war of attrition, humans finding every weakness in the enemy's once mighty war machine. But the Eldari were not ones to give up easily. As the human attacks grew bolder, they escalated their own assault. They sent their warlords to Earth's major cities, commanding vast fleets of warships, and they unleashed a new wave of advanced ground forces. The humans had no choice but to fight back with everything they had. Massive skirmishes broke out across the globe as the war reached its most intense point yet. The conflict wasn't just limited to Earth anymore. The human fleet, now growing in strength and number, launched its first major offensive into space. The modified Eldari ships, once scavenged and adapted, were now part of a full-fledged Earth fleet, a symbol of humanity's newfound might. The Resistance had learned the art of space combat, striking at Eldari supply lines, intercepting reinforcements, and even challenging their flagship. Each battle was fierce, but humanity's resolve was unmatched. With every victory, their confidence grew, and the Eldari realized they were no longer facing a defenseless species. They were facing a rising power, one that had turned its greatest weakness into its greatest strength: the ability to learn, adapt, and evolve in the face of adversity. In one pivotal battle, a coalition of Earth's forces launched a full-scale assault on an Eldari space station. The mission was nearly suicidal, but the humans used a combination of guerrilla tactics, advanced weaponry, and sheer willpower to break through the alien defenses. The station fell, sending shockwaves through the Eldari command. They had underestimated humanity's ability to fight, to evolve, and to thrive against all odds. The victory marked a turning point. It wasn't just the loss of another military outpost for the Eldari. It was a blow to their pride, their confidence, and their belief in their own superiority. The Resistance, which had once been scattered and ragtag, was now a force to be reckoned with. The humans weren't done yet. They knew the war was far from over, but they had finally learned the true lesson the Eldari had failed to grasp. It wasn't about advanced technology or overwhelming power. It was about resilience, about the ability to stand tall when all seemed lost, to rise stronger from every defeat, and to keep fighting no matter the odds. With each victory, humanity's message grew clearer. The Eldari had come to conquer a defenseless planet. Now they were facing an enemy that would never surrender. And in that realization, the Eldari's fate was sealed. The turning tide had begun, and there was no going back. The Eldari's response to the loss of their space station was swift and brutal. Their once confident commanders, who had regarded Earth's resistance as nothing more than a fleeting annoyance, were now faced with an enemy they couldn't simply brush aside. The defeat had shaken the Eldari to their core, and they retaliated with an intensity humanity had not yet seen. They brought out their most advanced warships, their deadliest weapons, and their most experienced generals. For the first time in the war, the humans were facing an enemy that was truly fighting back with everything it had. Eldari warships descended upon Earth in waves, unleashing devastating barrages of energy blasts that vaporized entire cities in moments. Ground forces swept across continents with terrifying precision, crushing everything in their path. Earth's military had been able to match the Eldari's power before, but now the gap in strength between the two sides seemed impossible to bridge. Despite this, humanity's spirit remained unbroken. The Resistance regrouped, strengthened by their recent victories, and prepared for the fight of their lives. They knew that this counterattack could very well be their last chance to win the war. Earth's survival depended on their ability to continue pushing back against the invaders, to outsmart them once again, and to make one final stand. In the heart of the Resistance's command center, Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes stood before a digital map of the world. The Eldari had already taken key cities. Tokyo, Berlin, and London had fallen within days of the counteroffensive beginning. But humanity wasn't retreating. They were digging in, preparing their forces for a decisive defense. Hayes knew that Earth's military couldn't withstand the Eldari onslaught forever, but they had one advantage: their ingenuity. "We can't match them in sheer firepower," Hayes said, addressing his officers. "But we have something they don't. They don't understand our tactics, our ability to improvise. We'll use the environment, the terrain, everything we can to keep them guessing." His words rang with the quiet confidence of a man who had seen the worst of humanity's struggle and knew that, if they kept fighting, victory was still within reach. At the same time, Dr. Eleanor Green's team continued working on the final refinement of the ancient energy network. They had learned more about the mysterious energy source that had fueled humanity's forgotten civilization, and now they were ready to unlock its full potential. The power contained within the ancient technology could turn the tide, but only if they could figure out how to channel it properly. The key, they discovered, lay in the synchronization of the human-modified weapons and the ancient energy system. By creating a unique resonance between the two, they could amplify their existing weapons to unprecedented levels. It wasn't just about shooting down Eldari ships. It was about disabling their power sources and crippling their fleet in one devastating strike. Time was running out. The Eldari were closing in on the last human strongholds, and Earth's remaining defenses were being overwhelmed. But the Resistance held firm. Every day, scientists and engineers worked around the clock to perfect the new weapons, while Resistance cells launched surprise attacks on the Eldari forces, sowing confusion and buying precious time. In the ruins of what had once been New York City, a final plan was set into motion. The human fleet, now fully equipped with the modified Eldari ships, took off for the Eldari's flagship, a massive command ship hovering in low Earth orbit. This was it. The humans would strike directly at the heart of the Eldari's operation. If they could take down the flagship, they could cripple the invaders' ability to coordinate their forces. The humans knew they were outnumbered and outgunned. But the final plan wasn't just about firepower. It was about striking a blow to the very heart of the invaders' arrogance. The Eldari had believed themselves invincible, but now humanity had the weapon that could prove them wrong. As the human fleet made its way toward the flagship, the sense of unity that had defined the Resistance since the beginning burned brighter than ever. It was a symbol of everything humanity had fought for: their survival, their strength, and their future. There was no turning back now. The war was far from over, but one thing was certain: humanity wasn't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting to reclaim their place in the stars. The human fleet surged through space toward the heart of the Eldari's operations, the massive flagship that loomed in low Earth orbit, surrounded by an armada of warships. The fleet had grown since the days when humanity was on the brink of annihilation. No longer was Earth's military simply a collection of makeshift forces. It had evolved into a well-coordinated, resilient fighting machine. But even with all their preparation, the coming assault would be their most dangerous operation yet. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes stood in the command center of the lead human vessel, eyes locked on the holographic map displaying the Eldari flagship's position. His pulse raced, but his mind was clear. They had no illusions about the difficulty of this task. A direct assault on the flagship could easily spell the end for humanity. But there was no other choice. The Eldari had proven themselves to be relentless. If they didn't take this chance now, the invaders would erase the last remnants of human civilization. "We've only got one shot at this," Hayes said, addressing his commanders. "Once we engage, there's no turning back. We hit them hard, hit them fast, and we don't stop until the flagship falls. This is our moment. "This is how we win." His words rallied the crew, a mixture of soldiers, engineers, and civilians who had volunteered to fight for the future of their world. The fleet was composed of modified Eldari ships, adapted human technology, and makeshift weaponry that had been cobbled together from scavenged parts. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. The flagship in orbit was more than just a warship. It was a symbol of the Eldari's hubris. Their arrogance in assuming that Earth would fall without a fight had led them to underestimate humanity at every turn. But now the tide had shifted. The humans had unlocked the ancient energy technology, and with it, they had the firepower to strike at the very core of the alien forces. As the fleet neared the flagship, the Eldari responded immediately, launching their defensive barrage. Energy weapons from the flagship's enormous cannons lit up the sky, beams of concentrated plasma racing toward the human fleet. The humans dodged and weaved, using their modified ship's agility to avoid the worst of the blasts. It wasn't perfect, and several vessels were damaged. But the humans held together. The modified weapons, empowered by the ancient energy source, unleashed a barrage of their own. Blasts of energy that pulsed with unnatural force, tearing through the Eldari shields and making contact with the flagship. The first strike hit the flagship's forward shield generator, sending a ripple through its massive hull. It was working, but the Eldari weren't going to let it go down so easily. "The shields are down to 20%, one of Hayes' officers reported. "We've got to hit them again. Now." Hayes didn't hesitate. "Push forward. Give them everything we've got." With a roar, the human fleet surged forward, diving straight into the heart of the Eldari defenses. The Eldari retaliated with everything they had: massive bursts of energy, plasma bombs, and robotic drones that launched in every direction. But the humans, working in perfect coordination, responded with calculated precision, targeting weak points in the alien ships. The modified Eldari technology had given them a new edge, and they were using it to its fullest. Meanwhile, on the surface of Earth, the human resistance fought tooth and nail to hold their ground against the Eldari's ground forces. Resistance cells, scattered across the planet, launched strikes against the invaders' command centers and supply lines, cutting off vital resources and sowing chaos. The Eldari were stretched thin, their forces divided between maintaining their dominance in space and fighting humanity's guerrilla tactics on the ground. Back in space, the human fleet's continued assault on the Eldari flagship reached a critical moment. With one final surge of power, the humans fired the full force of their energy weapon directly at the flagship's core. The blast tore through the alien ship's central energy chamber, sending a shockwave throughout the flagship. Sparks and explosions erupted from the ship as it began to crumble, its core destabilizing. The flagship was falling. But the battle was far from over. The remaining Eldari forces, now leaderless and in disarray, launched a final desperate counterattack. The human fleet, though victorious in this moment, was battered and worn. But the humans pressed forward, knowing that they had just dealt a devastating blow to the heart of the Eldari war effort. As the Eldari flagship began to disintegrate, humanity knew they had taken the first step toward victory. The war was not over yet, but with the fall of the Eldari's command center, hope had been rekindled. The Eldari may have come to Earth expecting easy conquest, but now they were facing a force that had found its strength in the unlikeliest of places: the unyielding will of humanity. The fall of the Eldari flagship sent shockwaves through the alien fleet. As the once imposing warship crumbled into space debris, the remaining Eldari forces were left in disarray. Their leadership had been decimated in an instant, and their once immense confidence began to erode. It was as if the very heart of their invasion had been ripped out, and with it, their ability to coordinate a successful assault on Earth. The human fleet, battered but unbroken, watched as the remains of the flagship drifted into the vacuum of space. The battle was not over, but the tide had undeniably turned in humanity's favor. There were still skirmishes to be fought, but the Eldari had lost their greatest advantage: their command structure. In the wake of their defeat, the invaders began to falter, their remaining ships turning in disorganized retreat, unsure of their next move. Back on Earth, the impact of the battle reverberated across every corner of the globe. News of the victory spread like wildfire. Humanity, once on the brink of extinction, had struck the first truly decisive blow against the Eldari. The Resistance, which had fought in the shadows, now stood proud and resolute in the face of the enemy's retreat. The victory wasn't just military, it was symbolic. It was the moment humanity proved that they would never bow to an invader, no matter how advanced or powerful. Lieutenant Colonel Samuel Hayes stood at the helm of his ship, looking out at the chaotic remnants of the alien fleet. For the first time since the war began, he allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The odds had seemed impossible. The Eldari had arrived with overwhelming force, their technology far beyond anything Earth could muster. Yet, humanity had risen to the challenge. They had adapted, learned, and fought with everything they had.